All right. Start recording. All right. Well, hello, and thank you for joining us. This is Networks Live on Demand, and we are here with JJ Montanaro from USAA. JJ is a certified financial planner and a retired Army lieutenant colonel, so he definitely knows all about military finances. Today, we're going to discuss military money mistakes and how to avoid them. I'm Liz Jones, the Blue Star Family's operations manager. Oh, excuse me. Also, if you have questions during this webinar and you're joining us via Zoom, you can ask them using the question and answer box at the bottom or the chat feature on the side. If you're joining us via Facebook Live and you have questions, you can just put them in the comments and I'll make sure to bring them forward to JJ. Thanks, JJ. Is there anything I forgot?
No, I think you got it all, Liz. We're ready to go.
Awesome. So I know you probably want to start with the straight shooter video. And we can jump into that, and then we can go into questions and just kind of talk about military money mistakes and how to avoid them.
Perfect.
All right.
Hey guys, I'm Jonathan, your straight shooter from USAA. Today, let's get straight to the point about avoiding making mistakes with your money while in the military. Yeah, once those first paychecks come, you think, I'm gonna go do this. And the next thing you know, boom, where did it go? Yes, I can admit making some mistakes myself. We're not all perfect. There are some steps you can take, however, to avoid money trouble, and it's really worth the time and effort to be prepared. Because sometimes making a few big mistakes can land you in a financial mess that really is just hard to climb out of. So here goes 6 just plain awful money habits when you enter into the military. Number 1, declining or reducing SGLI just to save money or because you don't think that you'll need it. That could cost you in the long run. Here's what you do instead. Elect SGLI, and depending on your family situation, maybe consider purchasing additional life insurance while you're so young and healthy, so you might at least have some coverage if your health deteriorates before you leave the military. Number 2, not having enough emergency savings, which means you could be forced to use credit for an unexpected expense, and that's just bad. Think about this. Contribute a small amount each paycheck to a savings account, your emergency fund, so you're ready when the next financial crisis lands at your doorstep. Number 3, spending money you don't have. Come on, buying things that you want versus things that you need, which can lead to a slippery slope in your finances. Here's the deal. Using credit isn't inherently bad. It's how responsibly you use your available credit that either helps or hurts your financial situation. Only put on a credit card what is already set aside in your checking to pay for. Number 4, this one is bad. Blowing your whole enlistment or re-enlistment bonus. You don't need that $10,000 watch. Try this instead. Treat yourself, but keep it to about 5 to 10%. Set aside the rest of an emergency fund, paying off debts, and better yet, saving for retirement in order to improve your financial situation in the future. And number 5, buying too much vehicle or paying too much for a vehicle. Come on, do you really need a 5-speed that gets you from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds? Absolutely not. For real, don't settle for the dealer offered financing without considering the total cost of ownership, which is the loan payment, cost of insurance, maintenance, and fuel. What can you afford? And what's the most favorable way for you to pay for or finance that vehicle? And finally, number 6, don't ignore your credit report. Reviewing your credit report annually or prior to financing large purchases is very, very smart. Review your credit report once a year and consider signing up for a credit education service like at USAA. For that specific action, you may help to improve your credit score. That's just smart. Okay. Enough of don't do this and don't do that. I'm just here to help you do the right thing with your cash, man. And thanks again for watching. And check out more episodes of Straight Shooters here on the USAA YouTube channel.
All right. So that awesome. It sounds like everything worked perfectly this time.
The third time is a charm, right?
There you go. There you go. So let's unpack that video because there was a lot of information in there and it was very short timing. the first thing, SGLI. What is it? And if you don't have it, should you get it?
Well, can we turn the clock back a little bit? Because I think one of the things, as we look at military money mistakes, what's been the biggest happening for our paychecks in January, and that's been not ours, a 2.6% pay raise. And so one of the things that I tell people on a regular basis is you may not get rich in the military, but you're going to have plenty of opportunities to save more, to set aside more, to pay down debt, to build savings, to do the things that were talked about in that video. And one of those opportunities is the cost of employment pay increase that we see this year is 2.6%. So has that already, I would ask everybody who's watching, has that already seeped into your spending, or have you fenced off a little bit of that and have a plan for it, whether it's to, again, to save, to pay down debt, to do those sorts of things. So whether it's the cost of employment, it's periodic time and service increases, promotions, those are all opportunities to do some financial good. And so I would think, when I think about military money mistakes, one of them would certainly be, not on the video, but taking advantage of those opportunities to do a little bit more. Now, what did you say? Jack,
no, I was asking about SGLI, and so I was like, what if you don't? I mean, I think most people know what it is, but just, you know, what it is, and should I get it? Should I have it? How much is it?
So we're talking, exactly, service members, group life insurance. There's $400,000 available, and like we pointed out in the video, you have to essentially opt out of it if you don't want it. And at $29 a month is not a lot. And the thing about life insurance is typically, if you were to decline it and later decided you needed it, that would typically be after something bad happened, something happened with your health. And at that point, instead of just having it, you'd have to go through some underwriting. So it could be problematic. So from our perspective, anytime you have a life event, whether it's getting married, having children, leaving the military, those are all opportunities, buying a house, those are all opportunities and should trigger you to take a look at your life insurance, because $400,000 may be more than enough at age 22, but go down the road a little bit and think about the financial obligations that come into play, and maybe it's not enough. So life insurance is one of those things that's really a moving target. It's going to change. What you need is going to change, and you want to make sure that your coverage keeps pace with that.
Mm-hmm.
SGLI is an important part of that, so definitely don't turn that down.
Yeah, and another thing that, you know, they were talking about in the video, or he was talking about in the video, was as far as like credit. I know everyone had a ton of questions regarding credit, and, you know, how to get it, how much is too much? Is there such thing as too much?
Yeah. Well, of course, there's a difference between credit and debt, and so one of the things that there can certainly be too much debt. But one of the questions I saw that you had sent me that I thought was pretty interesting is, hey, if I have credit and I don't, and I use it and then I immediately pay it off, is that a bad thing? And I think that's one of the myths out there, is that is somehow bad to do that you have to carry a balance. So to the person that asked that question, I would say, heck no, that's an ideal thing. And I've talked about my son, and he joined the military, and when he went to boot camp, we sent him with a credit card, with the idea being is that he'd start to build that credit just by using it and paying it off. And so if your habit is to use the credit card and then immediately pay it off, hats off to you. That's a good way to do things.
Is that pretty much like the suggestion across the board is like, yeah, obviously don't spend money you don't have.
Yeah, if you're using that credit card to expand your lifestyle and spend money you don't have, then that can be problematic, because that is certainly something that over time can snowball. And you've heard probably about the snowball method of paying off debt. Well, you got that debt, and that snowball seems to roll a lot faster than the one that is rolling in terms of getting it paid off.
Very true, very true. So I don't know if you want to go through all of the steps in the video, or if you would like to just answer some questions that we got from beforehand and during the right now. We've got some questions coming in too. One of the questions was obviously the question about the debt and the credit card, as far as like establishing credit. So that's probably a good way to establish credit, is to get a credit card, charge something, pay it off. But if you pay it off on that exact same day, does that do anything?
Yeah, it is. So if you go back and look at your credit report, now remember your credit report is not your credit score, but it's the data that's used to create the score. And so if you go and look at your credit report, you'll actually see it'll have a month, and then it'll have, if things are going right, a green check the box, which essentially means that you made an on-time payment. So it doesn't matter if the money sat there as a balance for 3 days or for 13 days, as long as you made the on-time payment, you get the green check. So again, no reason, different cards will have different timelines in terms of when they start accruing interest, which you certainly don't want to do, but there's certainly not a penalty for making those payments, again, immediately right after you make the purchase. And we'll do that at our house oftentimes when, for example, we'll save to buy a plane ticket somewhere, buy the plane tickets with a credit card, and then immediately go in and pay the credit card off.
Okay. Would that be a good tip for helping to repair your credit score?
So when you look at repairing your credit score, certainly we can't change what has already happened. But when you look at the factors that go into the credit score, the 65% of your score is based on making on-time payments and then how much you owe. And so the how much you owe, we can chip away at that over time. But the on-time payments and doing that consistently is something that we can work from this day forward. So even if, which we don't recommend, even if you have to make the minimum payment, that's much better than skipping a payment. So again, those top two factors, pay on time every time and owing as little as possible, are both going to go a long way towards helping you improve your credit. One of them, very easy to do. The other one could take some time.
I'm just wondering, out of curiosity, if you could not make that full minimum payment and you made like half of it, would that be a ding against you?
Actually, that's actually a question. So you don't make the minimum payment, would that show up? I don't actually know the answer to that, Liz. I would suspect that would not be a good thing and would probably count against you, but I don't know that for certain. So when in doubt, rather than say I know it, I will tell you I don't know.
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah. We did have some questions coming in about retirement. And as far as like financial planning for retirement, which we have done a webinar on previously. So if you're catching this and you want to know a little bit more, you can visit our YouTube channel, or you can visit our Facebook page, and that video is on there for retirement. But just in general, for USAA financial advisors, are they available to retirees?
Yeah, sure. Anyone can call, talk to one of our advisors. We have financial planners as well as financial advisors. And I think when you look at retirement, you really have two separate and distinct phases. One is getting there. And if you're in your 20s and you have literally decades to go until retirement, it's all about good habits and saving and taking advantage of the thrift savings plan, contributing to an IRA. And so that's fairly easy. When you get to the back end of it, all of a sudden you're talking about retirement income planning and when am I going to start Social Security benefits and which accounts do I tap when. Again, much more complex, but in either case, it can help to have somebody, a second opinion, a sounding board. And so when I think about military money mistakes, if you think about the military lifestyle and the military community, one of the things that maybe isn't as valued as it might be is just the idea of being able to raise your hand and ask for help. And so whether that's help is from USAA or going to an on-installation financial counselor, there's nothing wrong. In fact, it's good to ask for help because oftentimes we don't even know what we don't know. So USAA is certainly a place you can turn, and there are other places. But if you don't know, it does make sense to ask.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. I completely agree with that because there are many times where there's just so much out there, especially financially, that, I personally don't know. So it's always good to turn around and ask somebody who does know. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely, how to prepare financially for retirement. Like, you kind of covered that a little bit as far as like having different accounts. I know that, you and I had also kind of touched a little bit on like SBP and what it is and should you get it?
That's a good question. And before let's go to another acronym, BRS, because I read an article this morning about seeing that at this point, after a full year of enrolling new people that joined the military, there was over a 500,000 of people in the military serving that are covered by the blended retirement system. And so we talked a lot about that last year in terms of folks opting into it and making that decision. Going forward, the key is that people take advantage of the system, of the blended retirement system, by contributing at least, we're talking about retirement, 5% into that thrift savings plan, the government's version of a 401k. So I think when you ask the question, hey, how do I prepare for retirement? The biggest thing that most folks out there have that somebody like me doesn't have is time. In a way to take advantage or leverage that time is to do things like contribute to the TSP. Now, once you get ready to retire, one of the decisions you'll make if you're married at that point in time is whether or not you opt for the survivor benefit plan, or SBP, that you were asking about. And so that's a it depends on the individual circumstances, but in my mind, it is a great way to protect your retirement benefit for the ones you love. And on a dollar for dollar basis relative to permanent insurance, it's pretty cost effective. Generally, it costs about 6.5% of whatever the covered retirement pay is, but it's taken out on a pre-tax basis. So if you're a military spouse, you actually have to sign off on whatever decision you guys make with respect to that. If you don't, for example, if you don't want it, you have to say, hey, I acknowledge that I'm giving this up. And I think it's a great program. And if I was to make a generalization, it'd be if there's any doubt or you have any question, take advantage of that survivor benefit plan. But if you're going to, one way or another, that's one of those things that we talked about before. When does it make sense to get help? This would be a question that you might want to talk to somebody about, see how this particular program fits into the rest of your financial situation. Because again, it may be that it fits better in some places than it does in others, but it's can be an important part of your overall retirement plan.
Yeah. Do you know how the blended retirement system works with SBP? Is it still the same setup as with the legacy system?
Generally speaking, yes. Yeah. So the retirement, there's some potential variations based on taking a lump sum or not taking a lump sum, but essentially the program works the same way.
Okay, awesome. Great. Thank you for that, because I know nothing about the blended retirement system. My husband retired this past year and he was under the legacy system. So I think that all the people coming in or maybe younger are going to have a lot of questions regarding the blended retirement system and the best way to go about using it to their advantage, really.
Yeah, I mean, and essentially, if you're in the pre-retirement phase, it becomes a question of maximizing what they put in the thrift savings plan, at least to the point where they're putting 5% in so they get the full 5% from their service. If they're not doing that, in my mind, that's a mistake. On the other hand, there's some other decisions. One of them relates to one of the things that was in the video, was the idea that there's a potential with the blended retirement system getting a mid-career bonus. So somewhere between that 8 and 12 year mark, all of a sudden you're getting a lump sum of money. What do you do with that? And in the video, we talked about using it as an opportunity to pay down debt, to build savings, or to save for the future. So that would be something that somebody under the blended retirement system would want to be cognizant of. And then on the back end, retirement, there's still a pension. There's still it's just a little bit smaller than what you guys got, having just retired recently, but it's still there. There's still the SBP decision. In addition to that, there's this potential for a lump sum payout, but that again probably is a whole nother set of videos to get into that one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the general overview. Just it sounds like it can be very individualized, and you're probably best to reach out to a financial advisor to help you with your specific situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably good guidance, no matter what the topic, whether it's insurance related, retirement related, savings and investments. But again, some things from a habit standpoint just make a lot of sense, and that's
right.
Whether BRS or not BRS. In my mind, hey, you ought to be contributing to the TSP. You ought to have a robust emergency fund, so if something bad happens, you've got cash on hand to take care of it. So some things are fundamentally sound and probably don't need a lot of examination. At least that'd be my guess.
Thanks. I know you were just talking about emergency funds, so I'm kind of going to switch gears a little bit. One of the questions that we got that came in was, how many savings accounts do you recommend having? And how much should you put in each, regarding like emergency fund and play fund and
Yeah. So I think we talked about that before, Liz. I'll use my own example. We actually have savings accounts for all of our different short-term goals at our house. So we have a vacation fund. We do an annual trip to Vegas, which I joke about, which is true. We have right now I've got what's called River Cruise 2019. So for the last couple of years, we've been putting money in that fund. So I think we have an emergency fund and a house fund. So we have like 4 different savings accounts. And for me, it works really well that I have a savings account for each of those different purposes. So when I look at that money, I know what it's for. And it actually makes it, for me, again, harder to go in there and pull that money out, because if I pull the money out of that River Cruise fund, it means something to me. Hey, there goes an extra trip on the River Cruise fund, or I'm putting the trip in jeopardy. So I don't think there's any limit to how many you can have. There's certainly not from the standpoint of a financial institution, but it really depends on what works for you. So the way we like to do it is name them and put money in there for the purpose, whether it's emergencies, a home repair, an improvement fund, or trips. But whatever works for you, it might look a little bit different from that, or maybe it doesn't. But I don't think there's a set number. Hey, you ought to have 1 or 2. I mean, clearly in my mind, you ought to have 1 that's an emergency fund. But beyond that, it's like the old envelope system or the Christmas accounts. There's a lot of different ways that you can make those savings accounts work for you.
So pretty much, you can have as many accounts as you need. As far as like number wise, just throwing a number out there for emergency fund, what is like the bare minimum?
Yeah. So I think $1,000 is kind of a good number. If you think of all the bad stuff that happens, I mean, for most people that will cover all your tires if something happened, an emergency trip, go home to see a sick parent or relative. $1,000 typically is going to cover your deductibles if you get in a car accident or that sort of thing. So to me, that's a great start point. And I'd almost want to get to that level before I start doing some other cool stuff. But as a financial planner, the rule of thumb in the financial planning world is something a lot of people have heard over and over again, is that 3 to 6 months. But truthfully, it depends on who you are and your situation. I mean, if I was getting ready to get out of the military next year, I would have been saving up to give me some cushion for that transition. So I might want more than that. On the other hand, I just re-enlisted. Things are going well. Maybe I could be down at the bottom end of that spectrum.
All right. So I know he touched on this in the video, cars, vehicles, and financing a vehicle.
Yeah. So whenever I start talking about cars, I feel like my nose might start to grow, because we've had to you ever have one of those do as I say, not as I do moments?
Yeah. This is going to be a good one for me too. So.
Yeah. So anyway, but you can drive around any military installation and drive through the parking lots and go, what the heck is going on here? Because there's some cool cars there. Let's say that. I'll put it that way. And one of the things that we try to encourage folks to do is make a smart decision with that car. And as was said in the video, I think you have to look at, beyond the car payment, the total cost of ownership, the insurance cost, the maintenance cost, the gas, all those things come into play. And ideally, from a percentage standpoint of gross income, you want to be somewhere in that 10 to 15% of gross income range, so that you're not spending so much money there that you're restricting yourself elsewhere. You're not able to save. You're not able to meet your other obligations. So I think if you can make a prudent car decision, and that might start with making the decision, hey, do I go new or do I go used? And maybe you can get a gently used vehicle that's got a dealer warranty, and it is still, so you have that to rely upon, that costs significantly less, because typically cars depreciate roughly 20% when you drive them off the lot. So if somebody else can take that depreciation hit, but you can still take the rest of the warranty and have a good, reliable vehicle, you might be better off financially.
Okay, great. There is a question that came in, and I kind of don't understand it, so I'm sure you probably will. It says, I saw information on dividends and these types of investments. How do they work, and how do I get involved, and are they beneficial?
On dividend reinvestment plans? Is that,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yes, dividends on these types of investments.
Yeah, so
So,
okay. So essentially, when you look at dividends, if you buy a stock, a stock of a company that is established, one of the ways that you make money is that the company pays dividends out on a regular basis, and you might own that particular stock through a dividend reinvestment program, where you buy it actually from the company and do it that way, or if you own a mutual fund or an exchange traded fund that holds companies that pay dividends, you'll receive those dividends uh, typically on a quarterly or a semi-annual or annual basis. So dividend is basically just the company is a way to return money to the shareholders, which you might be either through directly purchasing the company through their dividend reinvestment plan, or by owning the company as a stock or as part of a mutual fund. So how do you get involved with something like that? That would be something where you could call one of our USAA advisors, and they could dig into your situation and figure out what made sense given all the other things going on in your situation, and help you with that. Or again, if you wanted to figure out or learn more about it, there are organizations like the American Association of Individual Investors, AAII, is a good resource. Heck, there's information. I bet there's information on Military One Source. So there are a lot of different places you can go to figure out. Go to USA.com. There's just tons of articles and content on this sort of thing. So I would learn more before I would jump right in to figure out. So you want to understand what it is that you're doing. But essentially, when you talk about dividends, that's something that a company pays. Some companies, not all companies, smaller companies that are just starting out don't, but bigger, more well-established companies will pay dividends. And as an investor in that company, you can participate, whether it's through a mutual fund or directly through the company, or owning the company in a brokerage account. How was that for long-winded?
thank you. No, that was very informative because I really didn't know anything about any of that. So I'm sure there are plenty of people out there also who didn't know anything about it. So thank you very much. Back to the video a little bit. Bonuses. What is the best way to invest your bonus?
So I think that the point that in the video was a good one, is that, hey, don't just go out and blow it. And I think when you think about bonus, sure, that's what I would call a windfall. Maybe it's expected or unexpected, but essentially a big chunk of money comes your way, whether it's a tax. For a lot of folks, it's a tax refund, which we'll see those coming up here in the coming weeks and months. That could be a re-enlistment bonus. It could be an inheritance. And I think the biggest thing with any of those situations is to go into it, and before you start haphazardly going off and doing one thing or the other, is you develop a game plan. So part of that game plan might be some fun, do something good. And I think in the video we suggested 5 or 10%. So if you had a $10,000 re-enlistment bonus or $10,000 windfall, maybe with $1,000 you go buy a new toy or take a trip, do something like that. But then use the balance of the money in a thoughtful way to pay down debt, to build savings, that emergency fund piece we were talking about. Or maybe, hey, you fund a Roth IRA for 2018 and 2019. So save and invest, pay off debt, and build savings, and of course have a little bit of fun, but do it in a way that it's a game plan, as opposed to all of a sudden you look back a couple of weeks later and you're like, what happened to all that money?
Yeah, that actually that sounds like a very good checklist, of things that to cover before you start going out and just blowing it. We did get a really interesting question about a military spouse who is a freelancer, freelance writer. And she wanted to know the best way to store extra money and savings, and to keep it as a discretionary spending to keep it as discretionary spending, or to just put it into a checking, or a mix of both, with kind of, your side job, and
Right.
What do you do with that money?
Well, so I would think that keeping it separate would make sense. One of the things from my own dipping my toes into the world of small business and I won't say this in a good way. It's actually kind of a negative thing, but Uncle Sam has always got his hand out in terms of what you might owe for taxes and that sort of thing. So just that alone would be enough to put the fear of God into me and make me say, hey, you know what? This income coming in, I'm gonna keep it in a separate account for business. I'm gonna set aside money for taxes. I'm gonna pay my estimated taxes, but so I would definitely account for that. And if you just flow the money into your regular checking account, in all likelihood, you might get to the end of the year not having paid any estimated taxes and not having accounted for that and find yourself in a bad spot. So from that standpoint, I think keeping it separate makes sense. And then I go back to what we talked about with the different funds and how many savings accounts you could have. Again, if we just put the money in our checking account, it's amazing how we can spend it and it can go away. So I think if you purposefully save it, if you've got different things that you're trying to do with that extra money, that would make a lot of sense. So I don't know that I would just stick it in my regular operational account as opposed to keeping it separate.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Another question is, are there special accounts that can be set up with a good return for emergency money?
Yeah, so again, if you ask me with emergency money, the number one thing that we're looking for that money, or that I'm looking for, is that it's there and it's all there when I need it. So while it would be cool to buy some high flying stock and see it double in a matter of weeks right before my emergency, so essentially the market made up my emergency through returns, it would be awful to put $1,000 in my emergency fund, see, like we saw last month in December, see the market plummet. Then all of a sudden I have an emergency, and instead of having $1,000 there, I've only got 700. So I think the number one thing I'm looking for is safety within. So that's why I think like a savings account is the best part. So once you start looking at savings accounts, look at the realm of savings accounts and see what FDIC insured or NCUA insured savings account provides the best return, and that's where I would go. So are you going to see really big, sexy numbers? No. But again, to me, I'm willing to give the big numbers up so that I know that for the purpose of this particular money, it's all going to be there when I need it or if I need it.
Yeah, and would that hinder access to it at all? Like if you needed it, you put $1,000 away and then you needed it and they're like, in a couple days or...
Yeah. So with the savings account, and I'd have to go back and look at this, but there are a limited number of accesses by law that I think it's 6 per month or 6 per billing cycle. So I'd have to go back and check me on that number, but that's basically true, that there's a limited number of times. So you don't want your savings account to be, your go-to account for your soda, for your stop at McDonald's, for everything else. It's got to be something that you periodically access. But being able to access it 5 or 6 times a month should be more than enough, unless you're having a really bad month.
It's possible.
It happens.
It does. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and ask them in the question and answer box or the chat feature. Is there anything else that I'm forgetting that you would like to discuss?
Yeah, I think so. So one of the things I wrote down as a potential military money mistake kind of has to do with the windfalls that we talked about, but have to do with deployments, and just the fact that when you look at deployments, I mean, financially, as much pain as they can be and as much of a struggle as they can be, financially, oftentimes they offer an opportunity to save and invest because we've got income going up, expenses going down, like led by taxes going down. So it's an opportunity, if we take advantage of it, to really make some hay financially, whether, again, it's paying down debt or building savings or saving for the future. And so that would be something that, again, like we talked about with an inheritance or some sort of windfall or a re-enlistment bonus, with an upcoming deployment, if you go into it with a real plan, you can have a positive impact on your finances. So to me, the mistake would be not taking advantage of from a financial standpoint of deployment.
Awesome. I got a question here about a car loan. So, if I have a car loan already, is there any reason to get a credit card also to build credit? So that's more a credit question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, I talked earlier about two of the factors that have a big impact on your credit score, which was paying on time every time and not owing a lot. But one of the other factors that also plays a role is kind of a diversity of using different types of credit. And so a revolving account like a credit card versus an installment loan like a car loan are two different types of credit. And so from a scoring standpoint, it can certainly be advantageous to have used both of those types of accounts. So I would answer that question, yes. Sometimes when people are trying to build or rebuild credit, it may be easier for them to get an installment loan like a car loan because it's secured. So if you don't pay your installment loan, what's going to happen? Somebody's going to come take the car, for example. Whereas with a credit card, there's really no leverage that the lender has. So if you don't pay that, well, eventually they'll write it off and you'll get a bunch of calls, but there's nothing for them to physically come back and take charge of.
Mm-hmm. All right. Oh, we have an investment question. We recently got a settlement. I'm not going to say how much it is. And we are wondering what is the best way to go about saving and investing? I think that's going to be a question where you need to call and
See, it only took so long, Liz. You got this.
I know. Well, it only took 3 webinars for me to understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Again, because that person is going to have a lot of different things going on. To sort of make a generalization wouldn't make sense. But I think, again, what does make sense is to have a thoughtful plan to go at it in terms of paying down debt, building savings, saving for the future, doing all the things, but my goals might be different from theirs. And so for them to sit down, to call USAA, to figure out, okay, here's what we want to accomplish. What's the best way to put this money to work? It is going to be, again, a very individualized answer to your point.
All right.
So one of the, can I go?
Good.
One of the things that sometimes comes up in a situation like this is when we watch the markets in the stock market, whether you're buying mutual funds or exchange traded funds or stocks. I mean, we're seeing some pretty wild swings both up and down. And so a lot of times it can help people feel better about making a long-term investment by instead of just going into the market all at once, setting up a plan so that over the next 12 to 24 months, they'll automatically move a little bit of money each month. And then perhaps if the market were to drop, they could decide, you know what, I'm going to move all that's left in. So you can set up something like that where you're not fully invested in day one. Now, studies have shown historically that it probably makes more sense to invest all at once, but it would be quite a bit disheartening if it was December 1st of last month and you got a $50,000 windfall, you put it in the market, and at the end of the month it was worth, $30,000. As opposed to if you take that 50,000 and over the next 10 months put 5,000 a month, you'd be in better shape.
Yeah. I feel like we're jumping around all over the place, but here's another TSP question. What is the recommended percentage to contribute towards the TSP?
So again, kind of depends on where you're at. If you're my age, and you haven't saved at all, it's about 75% of your income. But if you're just starting out, I mean, we would say 10 to 15%. So
okay.
somebody in their 20s, that'd be a good place to start. But if that sounds like a lot and that's not something you can do right away, just get your foot in the door, because sometimes if you hear 10% and there's no way you can do it, you just kind of tune it out. Instead, say, okay, you know what, we're going to go in there and we're going to do 5% or 3%. And then again, going back to where we started with those pay raises, promotions, time and service increases, all those provide an opportunity to go back in and ratchet it up. So my big message would be not necessarily a certain percentage, but just the fact that you get started. But ideally, you start somewhere in that 10 to 15% range.
Yeah. So this is a good question too about what type of saving strategy do you recommend for a child?
Well, if it's college related, Liz, I would say I like the 529 college savings plan. That's a great way to save for college specifically. if it's not college related, then essentially you have different options, but there's one way to own an account would be called a uniform transfer to minors account, UTMA. And with a UTMA ownership, you could buy, for example, a mutual fund or you could a CD or something like that. So I would go back whenever somebody asks me what's the right way to invest, whether it's for them or their kids, I would go back to, okay, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? Are we saving for college? Are we saving for a down payment on a house in 5 years? Are we saving for next year's vacation? And depending on what the purpose is, what the goal is, that's going to drive the answer to what makes the most sense. And for a kid, for a child, if they've got if you're saving for their retirement, then they've got literally decades. If you're saving for their college, they might have a couple of decades. Mm-hmm. But as a program, at least in terms of saving for college, that 529 college savings plan is a cool way to do it. Provide some tax benefits in that if you put the money in there, it's tax deferred, so you don't pay tax on the dividends or the interest or the capital gains. And then if you pull it out for qualified education expenses, what you put in plus all that growth comes out tax free. So that's pretty cool.
Okay. Another question, and this is a good one, and I feel like a lot of people can relate to this. With 6 years remaining in my enlistment and having made some poor financial decisions early in my career, how can I capitalize on my last 6 years?
New year, new you. So again, we can't fix what we did or didn't do in the past, and I think what you can do is build for the future. And so I would say my answer to that would be it's never too late in terms of doing all the financial good things that we like to talk about, spending less than you earn, setting aside money for emergencies, building for the future in terms of contributing to the TSP, maybe setting up some sort of IRA or Roth IRA. So I think, or maybe what you have to do is clean the slate in terms of paying down debt. So again, it kind of depends on what's going on. But my message would be it is truly a new year and a new you and a new chance to get a fresh start. And 6 years, frankly, is a lot of time to do a lot of good.
Awesome. So we have a question that has come up pretty much multiple times about the TSP and what funds are available in the TSP to invest in. Do you know?
I was reading that. Sometimes I just go off the rails, Liz. I was reading a thing from the TSP talking about the future state of the TSP and how they were going to have a window through which you could invest in a whole bunch of different things. But right now in the current TSP, you have 5 core investments, which are broad-based, index, very, very low expense funds. The C fund, which is large U.S. stocks, the S fund, which is small U.S. stocks, the I, which is developed foreign stocks, and then an F fund, which is U.S. bonds, U.S. company bonds, and a guaranteed G fund, which is kind of a hybrid, safe guarantee type of account. So those are your 5 basic investments, and you can invest in them individually, or for somebody who doesn't have the time or the inclination or the knowledge, they have what are called the L or life cycle funds. And with the L or life cycle fund, you just pick the date. So one of them, for example, is the L 2050. So if I was 20 years old right now, the L 2050 would be the one I would pick. It's the farthest date out. That date is supposed to correspond with your retirement year from civilian retirement year. So when you're 60 or 65. And if you put it in one of those L funds, you're getting a part of all 5 of those that I talked about, but it's pre-mixed. And as you get closer to the date, the target date, it becomes more and more conservative. So essentially those, you've got the L funds, which I think there's 5 of those, but they're just made up of those 5 investments that I talked about. So if you're trying to stay out of trouble, trying to spend as little time as possible with it, and again, don't have the inclination, those L funds can be a good way to do it.
All right. Got another TSP question. It's more, it says, if you don't opt into the TSP, will there not be a survivor benefit for retirement?
Yeah,
so I think.
Yeah, totally unrelated. So the survivor benefit plan has to do with the monthly retirement check, the monthly pension, if you will. So with the survivor benefit plan, if you opt into that, essentially, if let's say your spouse's pension was $2,000 a month, if you opted in for full coverage under the survivor benefit plan, if something happened to your spouse, then you would get $1,100 a month, inflation adjusted each year, for while you're alive. So that's what the survivor benefit plan, it's totally separate from the TSP.
Mm-hmm.
If something happened to your spouse and they had a TSP account, you would be the beneficiary of that account, and generally you would essentially take that as your own and have that money as part of your retirement account.
Yeah, I do feel like
that's a common question, actually.
I do feel like the acronyms, there's a lot of confusion because there's BRS and TSP and this and that and SBP, and everything kind of gets jumbled together. So having
the more you talk about it, the less you forget that nobody knows what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely if you're new to the military or you have never heard these terms before, yeah, it's a whole new vocabulary. You mentioned contributing 10 to 15% to TSP when you're in your 20s. When starting a career at 40, does that recommendation change to a higher percentage?
Yeah. So again, as you're getting to that point, you might be able to at that point start to visualize what retirement looks like and what that price tag is going to be. And then you can get a lot more specific in terms of determining, hey, what is my number? What is it that I need or we need to be able to accumulate to sustain ourselves in retirement? And so the closer you get to actual retirement, the more focus that should come into in terms of determining, hey, we need $2 million, $2.5 million, whatever the number is, to supplement Social Security, military retirement, and keep us in the lifestyle that we want. So for somebody maybe at 40, you still don't have an exact idea of what that looks like. But if you're just getting started, in most cases, 10 to 15% is going to have to increase to get you where you want to go if you're starting late.
Okay. This is actually a really good question. And I think, I know that I also have paper bonds. So it says, I have several paper bonds that have matured. Seems like I should cash them out and invest in another vehicle for growth. Is this approach recommended?
Yeah. So again, with the savings bonds, I think it's 30 years. For some reason, that number sticks with me, but you can learn all about what your options are by going to www.treasurydirect.gov, and they actually so you can look at, hey, has it got to the point where it stopped earning interest? And if that's where you're at, then yeah, that probably makes sense to look at options. But one of the things that you want to go into it eyes wide open with is, what are the tax implications of that? Because if you bought a $25 savings bond and now we're sitting here and it's now worth $125, when you cash that, you're going to have $100 worth of interest income that you're going to have to pay tax on. So that taxes might play a role. Now that'll be when you want to talk to your tax advisor and again, figure out, hey, are we ready for this? And then look at the options. So I think if I'm not earning interest, then yeah, there can be pretty good motivation to look at other options. On the other hand, a lot of those savings bonds, people bought when interest rates were higher, and so they're actually paying what has been over the last few years really competitive interest rates compared to what's the market today. So that'd be one to dig into and figure out what makes sense. But not earning interest is not good. How about that?
I agree. I agree. Here's a question that's about stay-at-home mom for many years, earned a degree and is now working, but doesn't have credit history. What is the best way to start building credit?
The fastest way? Is that?
The best way.
The best way? Yeah.
Okay.
So again, one way is if you have other accounts, if your spouse as accounts. So if you're on accounts jointly, you actually have been building credit. So one of the things that you can do is to be on joint accounts, and that'll help you. You can get a credit card perhaps You can, if you can't get a credit card, you can get a secured credit card. So a secured credit card, you essentially give the bank, let's say $500 or $1,000 or $250, and they give you a credit card, which is reported to the credit bureaus as a credit card. But in essence, there's no risk for the bank because they already have your money. And so a secured credit card is an option. And we've talked about some of the other things. It could be a car loan, it could be some other sort of installment loan. So I would go back and look to get together at your situation with your spouse and figure out what makes the most sense. But it could be joint accounts, it could be opening up some new ones.
All right. We're going to take one more question because I know that we're getting close to ending time here. As far as how do we get SGLI?
So SGLI, you almost have to unget it. So when the service member joins, generally they'll get that SGLI coverage of $400,000 unless they opt out. They also periodically update the beneficiary. So as a new spouse or something like that, that'd be something you'd want to check with your service member on, make sure that they've updated beneficiary to reflect the fact that you're married now and current wishes. So it's essentially, when we talk about employee benefits here on the civilian side of the world, that group life insurance is an employee benefit for service members. And again, unless they elect to take less than the $400,000, generally when they go through boot camp, that'll be part of the end processing. They'll get that coverage. So you probably have it already.
Okay. Just one more little, it's not even a question really. It's more or less the fact of if you are not a USAA member, can you still use USAA for financial planning or financial advice, or how does that all work?
Yeah, if you call USAA and you're currently serving or a spouse of someone who's currently serving, we will make you a member and give you advice. So yeah, you're definitely eligible for membership, and we want to make you part of the family for sure.
Yeah, and there's definitely the website, the financial tools, www.usaa.com/financial tools, and all that information on there is free. You do not have to be a USAA member to access it. You can go in there and kind of play around. There's different calculators and graphs and all sorts of stuff. Obviously, if you would like it to be tailored to you, you will have to become a member so that it can get your information to put in there.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. Some of this tools are, you don't need to, you can do it all externally. Some of them play off the information that we have about you. That's a great point. And if you want to learn more, you can go to usa.com/join as far as eligibility and the rules surrounding that. But definitely, from my perspective, definitely worth doing.
I agree. Well, JJ, I want to thank you so much for being here and answering all of these questions today. I know that this one ran a little bit longer than we normally do, but there were a lot of questions out there, and you seem to have answered a bunch of them. And if anyone has any questions that we were unable to get to, you can email me at ljones@bluestarfam.org, and I will filter them on to JJ, and we'll get some answers for you.
I'm going to go back, and I have to go back and look at a partial minimum payment, see how that shows up on the credit report. So I've got my homework already, but I'm happy to get some more if you got some more questions.
All right. Thank you so much. It's great to see you.
All right. Great to see you, Liz. Happy New Year.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Bye.